The Valorian Concord had ruled their corner of the galaxy for 12,000 years. 17 different species lived together in peace. They built beautiful cities on 1,000 worlds. They created art and music and poetry. They studied the stars and unlocked the secrets of faster-than-light travel. But they had forgotten how to fight. Long ago, the founders of the Concord had made a sacred promise. They would never again make weapons. They would never again train soldiers. Violence was a disease of primitive minds, they believed. Evolved beings had no need for war. For 12,000 years, this philosophy worked. The galaxy was vast and mostly empty. The Concord grew rich and happy and soft. Then the Harrow came. No one knew where they came from. Some scientists believed they crawled out of the dark space between galaxies. Others thought they were older than the universe itself. It did not matter. What mattered was what they did. The Harrow were living nightmares. Each creature was a twisted mass of black metal and pale flesh, with too many legs and too many eyes and mouths that never stopped screaming. They moved through space in swarms of millions. They landed on planets like locusts. And they consumed everything. Not just food. Not just resources. Everything. They ate the cities and the forests and the oceans. They ate the air itself. They left behind dead rocks floating in the void, stripped of all life, all hope, all memory that anything had ever existed there. The first world to fall was Kephany 7. The Concord received a distress call that lasted 43 minutes. Then silence. When scout ships arrived 2 days later, they found nothing. The planet's atmosphere was gone. Its oceans were gone. Even the bacteria in its soil were gone. The Concord's leaders gathered in emergency session. They had no weapons. They had no soldiers. They had nothing but words and good intentions. They tried to communicate with the Harrow. They sent messages of peace in every language they knew. The Harrow did not respond. They simply kept coming. They tried to negotiate. They offered territory, resources, anything the Harrow might want. The Harrow wanted nothing except to feed. They tried to run. But the Harrow were faster. Their ships moved through space like sharks through water, hunting down refugee convoys with terrible patience. One by one, the worlds of the Concord fell. Archon Thessaly 9 watched her civilization die from the bridge of a refugee ship. She was the last surviving member of the High Council. The others had stayed behind to help evacuate their homeworlds. None of them had made it off. Thessaly 9 was tall and thin, with silver skin and eyes that changed color with her emotions. Right now, they were the deep purple of grief. She had lived for 300 years. She had seen wonders beyond counting. And now she would watch her entire species vanish into the hungry dark. Archon, said her aide, a young male named Corvix. We are receiving reports from Valoria Prime, her homeworld, the heart of the Concord, the most beautiful planet in known space. Show me, she said. The view screen flickered to life. Thessaly 9 felt her heart stop. The Harrow had reached Valoria Prime. Millions of their creatures swarmed across the planet's surface, like black water spreading across glass. Towers that had stood for 10,000 years crumbled to dust. Gardens that had taken centuries to grow withered and died in minutes. And everywhere, the people were screaming. The feed showed a nursery in the capital city. Small children huddled in corners while their teachers tried to comfort them. Then the walls began to crack. Black shapes poured through the gaps. The feed cut to static. Thessaly 9 closed her eyes. When she opened them again, they were the color of blood. How many ships escaped? She asked. 17,000, Corvix replied. His voice was barely a whisper. Out of a planetary population of 9 billion. 17,000. Not even a rounding error. Not even a footnote. Set course for the Sanctuary Nebula, Thessaly 9 ordered. All surviving ships are to gather there. We will make our final stand. Archon. Corvix hesitated. We have no weapons. What kind of stand can we make? I do not know. She turned away from the view screen. She could not watch any more. But I refused to die running. If the Concorde must end, we will end with dignity. The refugee fleet limped toward the Sanctuary Nebula. Behind them, 3 more worlds fell. The Harrow were speeding up. They had tasted the Concorde's fear, and it made them hungry for more. In the nebula, the survivors gathered. 32,000 ships carrying the last fragments of 17 civilizations. Artists and scientists and philosophers. Children who would never see their homeworlds again. Elders who remembered the old days of peace and plenty. They had perhaps 6 months before the Harrow found them. Thessaly 9 stood before the assembled survivors and spoke words she had never imagined saying. We must ask for help. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. The Concorde had never asked anyone for help. They were the most advanced civilization in the known galaxy. Who could possibly help them? We will send a message, Thessaly 9 continued. A prayer, if you will. We will broadcast it on every frequency, toward every star. We will beg the universe for salvation. But who will hear? Someone called out. We know every spacefaring species within 10,000 light years. None of them have weapons either. Then we must pray that someone beyond our knowledge exists. Someone we have never met. Someone who remembers how to fight. The message was composed over 3 days. The finest poets and linguists in the Concorde worked together to create something that would touch any heart, any mind, any soul that heard it. It began simply, "We are dying." It explained who they were. A peaceful civilization. A coalition of artists and dreamers. Beings who had never harmed another soul. It described the Harrow. The horror. The endless hunger. It showed images of burning cities and dead worlds. And it ended with a plea that echoed across the stars. If there are gods in the darkness, if there are angels among the stars, please hear us. We are not warriors. We cannot save ourselves. We can only beg for mercy from whatever powers exist beyond our understanding. Please, someone, anyone, save us. The message was transmitted at maximum power in all directions. Then the Concorde waited. Days passed. Weeks. The Harrow grew closer. Long-range sensors showed the swarm moving toward the nebula with terrible purpose. Thessaly 9 stopped sleeping. She spent her nights on the observation deck, staring at the stars, searching for any sign of hope. On the 43rd day, her patience was rewarded. A signal, weak and primitive, carried on electromagnetic waves that the Concorde had stopped using 10,000 years ago. It came from a small yellow star on the galaxy's outer edge. A star so unremarkable that the Concorde had never bothered to survey it. Corvix translated the message with trembling hands. They call themselves humans, he said. They say. He paused, checking the translation 3 times to make sure he had not made an error. They say they are coming. They say to hold on. Humans? Thessaly 9 had never heard the name. What do we know about them? Nothing, Archon. They are not in any of our databases. They appear to be a pre-eptile species. Our records show they have not yet developed faster-than-light travel. Then how can they possibly reach us in time? Corvix shook his head. I do not know, but they say they will be here in 6 months. Thessaly 9 looked back at the stars. Somewhere out there, on a small world orbiting an unremarkable sun, a species she had never heard of had heard her prayer. She did not know whether to feel hope or fear. She would learn soon enough. 6 months passed like a slow death. The Concorde survivors waited in the Sanctuary Nebula, watching their sensors counting the days. The harrow grew closer with each passing week. Their swarm had swelled to unimaginable size, fed by the corpses of 17 worlds. Scouts reported that the creatures had begun to evolve, adapting new forms specifically designed to hunt the refugee fleet. Thessaly 9 maintained her vigil on the observation deck. She ate little. She slept less. She stared at the darkness between the stars and waited for angels. On the 173rd day, the angels arrived. They were not what anyone expected. The first sign was a strange distortion in space, about 50,000 kilometers from the edge of the fleet. The Concorde scientists watched in confusion as reality itself seemed to tear open. The readings made no sense. Whatever was happening, it was not the refined fold space technology that the Concorde used. It was something raw, something brutal, something that hurt the universe itself. Then the ships emerged. Thessaly 9 felt her stomach turn. The Concorde's vessels were elegant things, all smooth curves and flowing lines, built to reflect the beauty of the cosmos. These ships looked like they had been designed by someone who hated the cosmos. They were massive blocks of black metal bristling with sharp angles and strange protrusions. Their hulls were scarred and pitted, covered in patches of armor that did not match. They looked like they had been in 1,000 battles and had won all of them through sheer meanness. By the first light, Corvix whispered, "What are those things on their hulls?" Thessaly 9 looked closer. The protrusions she had noticed were not decorations. They were weapons. Rows and rows of weapons. Tubes that could only be missile launchers. Long rails that crackled with electromagnetic energy. Rotating turrets that tracked the refugee ships with obvious purpose. "They are warships," she said quietly. "True warships." The Concorde had seen images of warships in their historical archives. Ancient relics from the days before the founding, when their ancestors still killed each other over territory and resources. But those images were faded memories, curiosities from a barbaric past. These ships were not memories. They were here. They were real. And they terrified her. The human fleet spread out in a defensive formation around the refugee convoy. There were hundreds of them, ranging from small, fast vessels to enormous carriers that dwarfed even the largest Concorde transports. Every single one of them bristled with weapons. The names painted on their hulls made Thessaly 9 feel sick. Retribution, Extinction Event, No Mercy, Scorched Earth, Hell's Messenger, Last Resort, and the flagship, the largest vessel in the fleet, a mountain of black steel that blocked out the stars behind it. Bore a name that the translation matrix struggled to process. Un's Pale Horse. "We are being hailed," Corvix said. His voice shook slightly. "Put it through." The view screen flickered. Thessaly 9 found herself looking at a human for the first time. She was not sure what she had expected. Something beautiful, perhaps. Something that matched the grace and wisdom needed to cross the stars. The woman on the screen was not beautiful. She was hard. Her face was square and weathered, with a long scar running from her left eyebrow to her jaw. Her eyes were the color of cold steel, and they held no warmth at all. She wore a uniform of dark gray, decorated with colorful ribbons and metal badges that seemed to represent achievements of some kind. "I am Commander Alara Vance of the United Nations Navy," the woman said. Her voice was flat and efficient. "We received your distress call. We are here to help." Thessaly 9 struggled to find words. She had prepared speeches for this moment. Elegant words of gratitude and hope. Now, they all seemed foolish. "Thank you for coming," she managed. "We did not expect. We did not know anyone would hear our message. We heard it." Vance's expression did not change. Took us a while to build ships that could make the trip. Faster-than-light technology is new for us. But we figured it out. You developed FTL travel in 6 months? Korvix blurted out. That is impossible. It took our species 300 years to... We were motivated. Vance cut him off without apology. Now, I need tactical information on these Harrow things. Numbers, capabilities, weaknesses, if you know any. Thessaly 9 felt off balance. She had expected diplomacy, introductions, an exchange of culture and philosophy. Not this cold, efficient demand for military intelligence. We will share everything we know, she said carefully. But first, perhaps we should discuss, later. Vance's tone left no room for argument. Right now, there's a swarm of alien monsters heading toward your people, and I need to know how to kill them. Everything else can wait. Kill them. The words hit Thessaly 9 like a physical blow. She had hoped the humans would find a way to drive the Harrow back, to contain them, perhaps even to communicate with them. You intend to destroy them? She asked. That's the general idea, yes. But have you considered that there might be another way? Perhaps they can be reasoned with. Perhaps they are simply afraid or confused, Vance laughed. It was not a kind sound. Lady, we've seen the recordings you sent. We know what these things do. They eat babies. They don't negotiate. They don't reason. They consume. Her eyes hardened even further. And where we come from, when something threatens innocent people like that, we don't try to understand it. We put it in the ground. Thessaly 9 felt something cold settle in her chest. She had prayed for angels. She had begged the stars for beings of light and wisdom. The stars had sent her something else entirely. You asked for help, Vance continued. We're here. We brought every warship we could build, every soldier we could train, every weapon we could create. We're not philosophers. We're not diplomats. We're the people you call when talking stops working. What are you then? Thessaly 9 asked quietly. Vance smiled. It was not a pleasant expression. We're humanity. We've been fighting wars since before we learned to write. We've killed more of our own kind than the Harrow have killed of yours. We've built weapons that can crack planets and poisons that can wipe out entire species. She leaned forward slightly. You prayed for angels. Angels don't exist. But we do. And we've been waiting our whole existence for an enemy we can destroy without feeling guilty about it. The view screen went dark. THESSALY-9 stood in silence for a long moment. Around her, the bridge crew exchanged uneasy glances. They had wanted salvation. They had received something else. Archon, Korvix said softly. What do we do? She thought about her homeworld, burned and dead. She thought about the nurseries, the children, the billions who had screamed in terror as the Harrow consumed them. We give them what they want, she said finally. We give them everything they need to fight. She paused. And we pray that we have not traded one nightmare for another. Over the next several days, the humans set up a command center aboard their flagship. Concord scientists were invited to share all data on the Harrow. The humans absorbed the information with frightening efficiency. They asked questions no one had thought to ask before. What were the Harrow made of? How did they communicate? Did they have a central command structure? Were there queens or leaders or weak points? And when they found answers, they smiled those cold, terrible smiles. We can kill them, Vance announced 3 days later. We can kill all of them. But it's going to get ugly. Thessaly 9 looked at the battle plans displayed on the view screen. She understood perhaps half of what she saw. Weapons she had never heard of. Tactics that seemed designed by madmen. How ugly? She asked. Vance met her eyes. Very. The Concord observers watched the humans prepare for war, And what they saw gave them nightmares. In the cargo bays of the human flagship, soldiers trained in brutal exercises that left them bloody and bruised. They fought each other with padded weapons, shouting and laughing, even when bones cracked. They ran until they collapsed, then forced themselves up and ran some more. Their bodies were covered in scars, and they wore those scars like badges of honor. In the science labs, human researchers dissected captured Harrow drones with an emotion the translation matrix called enthusiasm. They cut the creatures apart with steady hands and bright eyes, cataloging weaknesses, identifying vulnerabilities. When they found something useful, they celebrated like children receiving gifts. Their nervous system is distributed but interconnected, one scientist explained cheerfully. Hit them with the right electromagnetic pulse, and their whole body goes into seizures. They feel pain. Lots of it. The Concorde observer who heard this report went to his quarters and did not come out for 2 days. In the weapons factories aboard the carrier ships, engineers worked around the clock to build new tools of destruction. They designed bombs that would burn even in vacuum. They created poisons that would eat through the Harrow's strange metal flesh. They built machines that would broadcast sounds calculated to drive the creatures insane. Psychological warfare, Commander Vance called it. The Harrow have a hive mind. They share thoughts and feelings. So if we make one of them suffer badly enough, all of them will feel it. Cecily 9 struggled to understand. You would torture them? She asked. If it saves your people, yes. Vance showed no shame. The Harrow don't give their victims quick deaths. They take their time. They enjoy it. We've seen the recordings. Her jaw tightened. So yes, we'll make them hurt. We'll make them scream. And maybe, when enough of them are screaming, the rest will learn to be afraid. This is monstrous. Yes. Vance met her gaze without flinching. It is. That's why you called us. Thessaly 9 wanted to argue. She wanted to explain that the Concorde's philosophy was based on the belief that violence only created more violence. That revenge was a poison that destroyed the Avenger along with the target. That there had to be a better way. But she remembered the nurseries. She remembered the children screaming as black shapes poured through the walls. She said nothing. The human soldiers began wearing patches on their uniforms. Small symbols that represented their specialties. Thessaly 9 learned their meanings one by one, and each one made her feel more uneasy. The skull with crossbones meant combat infantry. The flame meant incendiary specialist. The mushroom cloud meant nuclear ordnance technician. The spider meant infiltration and sabotage. One day, she asked a young soldier about the patch he wore. It showed a stylized eye with a tear falling from it. That's the Psychological Operations Unit, he explained. We find ways to break the enemy's will to fight. Make them so scared and sad and hopeless that they give up before the battle even starts. Has that ever worked? The soldier smiled. It was a gentle expression, at odds with the terrible patch on his arm. Against the Harrow? We'll find out. Against other humans? He nodded, many times. There's a reason our species has fought so many wars. We're very good at hurting each other. Now we get to use those skills for something better. Better? Thessaly 9 could not hide her disbelief. You call this better? We're protecting innocents instead of killing them. The soldier shrugged. For us, that's progress. The final War Council was held in the Strategic Operations Center of the Pale Horse. Human commanders gathered around a massive holographic display, their faces grim and focused. Thessaly 9 and a handful of Concorde observers watched from the edges of the room. Commander Vance laid out the battle plan with cold precision. The Harrow swarm will reach the nebula in 72 hours. Current estimates put their numbers at roughly 3 billion individual creatures. plus approximately 5,000 hive ships. She zoomed in on the display. They think they're coming to feed. They're wrong. She highlighted a series of points along the swarm's projected path. We've seeded these coordinates with gravitational mines. When the swarm crosses them, the mines will activate and create pockets of extreme gravity. The outer edges of the swarm will be pulled apart. Confusion, chaos, separation. Another highlight, deeper in space. Our main fleet will engage here. We'll hit them with everything we have. Railguns, missiles, energy weapons. The goal is not to destroy them. Not yet. The goal is to make them angry. A Concord observer raised his hand. Why would you want to make them angry? Vance almost smiled. Because angry enemies make mistakes. They stop thinking and start reacting. They commit to attacks instead of retreating. They bunch up for coordinated strikes. She pointed to another section of the display. And when they bunch up, we hit them with the sunbreakers. The room fell silent. Even the human commanders seemed uncomfortable. What are sunbreakers? Thessaly 9 asked. Bombs, Vance said simply. Very large bombs. They generate a temporary fusion reaction roughly equal to a small star. Duration, about 8 seconds. Radius, approximately 10,000 kilometers. You're going to create a star? In the middle of a battle? 3 of them, actually, simultaneously. Vance's expression was unreadable. We estimate it will destroy about 40% of the swarm in the first strike. And the other 60%? Then we fight. Ship to ship. Room to room. Claw to claw if we have to. Vance looked around the room at her soldiers. This is what we were made for. This is what humans do. We don't quit. We don't surrender. We don't stop until the enemy is destroyed, or we are. She turned back to the display. The Harrow have never fought anyone before. They've only consumed. They don't know what it's like to face an enemy that hits back. They don't understand fear or pain or loss. A voice hardened. We're going to teach them. We're going to show them what it means to fight a species that spent its entire existence trying to destroy itself. One of the human commanders stepped forward. Admiral Chen Wei-Lin was an older man with gray hair and quiet eyes. He had barely spoken during the briefing. There's something else the Harrow don't understand, he said softly. Something that makes humans different from any species they've ever encountered. He looked at Thessaly 9. We know we're monsters. We know what we're capable of. We've seen the worst of ourselves in 1,000 wars and genocides and atrocities. We carry that knowledge with us every day. He paused. But we also know how to love. We know how to sacrifice. We know how to die for strangers we've never met, for reasons we can barely explain. He turned back to the display. The Harrow are coming to consume you. They see you as food. Nothing more. His voice dropped even lower. But they don't see us coming. They don't know that 11 million human soldiers have volunteered to die for species they'll never meet, on worlds they'll never visit. They don't know that we've built weapons specifically designed to make them suffer. They don't know that we've waited our whole existence for an enemy we can hate without reservation. He smiled, and for the first time, Thessaly 9 saw something that might have been sadness in his eyes. The Harrow are about to learn what it means to be hunted by humans. And by the time they understand, it will already be too late. The meeting ended. The commanders dispersed to their ships. In 72 hours, the battle would begin. Thessaly 9 stood alone in the empty operations center, staring at the holographic swarm that crawled across the display. Like a dark disease that she had wanted angels, she had received monsters. And somehow, impossibly, those monsters might be the only thing standing between her people and extinction. She closed her eyes and whispered a prayer to God she no longer believed in. Then she went to prepare for war. The Battle of the Sanctuary Nebula began at 0600 hours on what humans called a Tuesday. The Harrow swarm moved through space like a living cloud. Billions of creatures swimming through the void with terrible purpose. They had consumed 17 worlds. They expected this to be the 18th. They expected fear and chaos and easy feeding. They did not expect what happened next on. The gravitational mines activated without warning. Space itself twisted and screamed. Millions of Harrow creatures were torn apart in an instant, their bodies crushed into dense packets of matter by forces they could not comprehend. The outer edges of the swarm dissolved into chaos. Creatures that had never known confusion experienced it. For the first time, then the human fleet attacked. The first wave consisted of small, fast ships called destroyers. They dove into the swarm like wolves among sheep, their weapons blazing. Railguns fired metal slugs at a fraction of the speed of light, punching through Harrow flesh like needles through paper. Missiles exploded in brilliant flowers of fire, each one designed to spread specialized poisons through the vacuum. The Harrow tried to respond. They were ancient creatures, survivors of 1 billion years of evolution. They had consumed countless species across countless galaxies. But they had never faced anything like this. The human ships moved in patterns that seemed random but were actually precisely calculated. They attacked from all angles, never staying in one place long enough to be targeted. When Harrow creatures tried to swarm them, the ships simply accelerated away, leaving behind clusters of bombs that turned their pursuers into scattered atoms. Commander Vance watched the battle from the bridge of the Pale Horse, her face calm despite the chaos on her screens. "Phase 1 complete," she said. "Enemy formation is disrupted. Begin Phase 2. The carrier ships opened their bays, and a new type of vessel emerged. These were not sleek destroyers. They were boxy, ugly transports, heavily armored and slow. They carried something far more dangerous than missiles. They carried human soldiers. The boarding parties hit the Harrow Hive ships like hammers. Marines in powered armor burst through the creatures' organic hulls, their weapons screaming death. They moved in tight formations, covering each other, advancing through corridors of living flesh with professional efficiency. Sergeant Maria Santos was first through the breach on Hive, Ship 17. She had fought in 3 wars on Earth before volunteering for this mission. She had seen friends die. She had killed more people than she wanted to remember. But nothing had prepared her for what she saw inside the Harrow vessel. The walls were made of meat. The floor pulsed like a heartbeat. Strange tubes carried fluids she did not want to identify. And everywhere, there were eyes. Thousands of eyes watching her from the darkness. "Contact front." Someone shouted. The Harrow came at them in waves. Not millions, like outside. Dozens, hundreds, enough to overwhelm a normal force. The Marines were not normal. Santos opened fire with her pulse rifle, each shot burning through Harrow flesh like fire through cloth. The creatures screamed as they died. Keening sounds that would haunt her dreams for years to come. But she did not stop firing. She did not hesitate. She had been trained for this. Humans had been training for this since the first cave dweller picked up a rock and used it to kill something dangerous. "Push forward," she ordered. "Find the nerve center." The battle inside the Hive ship lasted 4 hours. The Marines lost 12 soldiers. They killed over 8,000 Harrow creatures. When they found the nerve center, a massive biological computer that coordinated the ship's functions, Santos personally planted the bomb that destroyed it. As she evacuated, the Hive ship began to tear itself apart. Without coordination, the Harrow creatures turned on each other, their shared mind fracturing into madness. Similar scenes played out across the battlefield. Human boarding parties struck dozens of Hive ships simultaneously. Some failed. Some Marines were overwhelmed. their final transmissions filled with screams and gunfire. But most succeeded, and each success sent shockwaves through the Harrow Collective. For the first time in their existence, the Harrow felt something new, fear. They had never experienced it before. They had consumed species that felt fear. They had fed on that fear like a spice. But they had never understood it. Now they did. Now they felt the cold grip of terror as their siblings died screaming around them. Now they understood what it meant to face something that could not be consumed. Admiral Chen Weilin watched his displays and saw the moment the tide turned. The Harrow swarm stopped advancing. For a long, beautiful moment, it simply hung in space, paralyzed by an emotion it had never known. Now, he said quietly, 3 ships at the center of the human fleet activated devices that should not have existed. They were called Sunbreakers, and they had been built for one purpose only. In the depths of space, 3 artificial stars bloomed into existence. The light was visible from Sanctuary Station, where Thessaly 9 and the Concord refugees watched in silence. It was brighter than anything they had ever seen. Brighter than their homeworld sun. Brighter than hope itself. The Sunbreakers burned for 8 seconds. In those 8 seconds, they consumed approximately 40% of the Harrow swarm. Over 1 billion creatures died in nuclear fire. Their screams transmitted through the hive mind to every surviving Harrow in the galaxy. When the light faded, the surviving Harrow did something they had never done before. They ran. The swarm scattered in all directions. Creatures fleeing wildly without coordination or purpose. Some dove into the nebula and lost themselves in its clouds. Some accelerated toward the edges of the system, desperate to escape the terrible light. Some simply stopped moving, their minds overloaded by the shared trauma of watching 1 billion siblings burn. The humans did not let them escape. "All ships," Vance commanded, her voice steady and cold. "Pursuit and elimination. No survivors. This ends today." The hunt lasted 6 weeks. Human ships tracked down every fleeing Harrow creature with patient, methodical precision. They developed new weapons as they went, learning from each engagement, adapting to each new Harrow tactic. When the creatures tried to hide in asteroid fields, the humans developed scanners that could detect their unique biological signatures. When they tried to camouflage themselves as space debris, the humans built drones that examined every piece of debris personally. Admiral Chen led the campaign to reclaim the Harrow-controlled worlds. What he found there hardened something in his heart forever. The Harrow had not just consumed resources. They had consumed civilizations. They had left behind nothing but dead rock and distant memories. Billion-year-old cultures, erased in months. Children who would never grow up. Elders who would never pass on their wisdom. Lives beyond counting, reduced to organic fuel for the swarm. "We found a recording," one of his officers reported, "from a nursery on what used to be Valoria Prime. Do you want to see it?" Chen watched the recording once. Then he ordered Sunbreakers deployed against the 3 remaining Harrow breeding worlds. The planets burned. The larvae died. The screaming of a dying species echoed through the void. Some of the Concord observers objected. They said this was genocide. They said the Harrow were sentient beings with a right to exist. They said humanity was becoming the very monsters they had been summoned to fight. Chung listened to their objections politely. "You're right," he said when they finished. "This is genocide. We are ending their species entirely. We will leave none of them alive. How can you justify that?" They demanded. Chun showed them the recording from the nursery. After that, no one objected again. The final Harrow hive ship was destroyed 7 years after the first battle. Its name was designated Target 0 in human records. It contained the last surviving queen, a creature roughly the size of a small moon, who had ruled the swarm for 100 million years. Commander Vance led the assault personally. She was older now, her hair gray and her face lined with 7 years of war. She had lost friends, lovers, soldiers who had trusted her. She had ordered attacks that killed thousands of her own people, but she had not lost. The Queen died screaming, her voice broadcast across 1,000 frequencies to ears that would never answer. The last harrow creature in existence thrashed and burned, and finally went still, and then there was silence. The war was over. Humanity had won. The celebration on Sanctuary Station was quieter than anyone expected. Concord survivors filled the great hall, their colorful forms clustered in small groups, speaking in low voices. Human soldiers moved among them, accepting thanks with awkward nods and tired smiles. 7 years of war had ground down even the hardest warriors. Victory felt less like triumph and more like relief. THESSALY-9 stood near the viewing window, watching the stars. The same stars that had burned so brightly during the Battle of the Sanctuary Nebula. The same stars that had witnessed the extinction of a billion-year-old species. She did not feel joy. She felt something complicated that her language had no word for. Gratitude mixed with horror. Relief stained by guilt. Hope shadowed by fear of what the future might bring. "You look like someone who won a war but lost something else," a voice said behind her. She turned. Admiral Ilara Vance stood there, 2 glasses of something amber in her hands. She had changed out of her uniform for the first time in years. She wore simple civilian clothes that made her look almost normal, almost peaceful. "I do not know what I feel," HFY admitted. "My people are safe. The harrow are gone. Everything we prayed for has come to pass. But," Vance offered her one of the glasses. HFY took it. She had learned to appreciate human beverages over the past 7 years. "They burned in interesting ways. But I cannot forget the things I witnessed," she said. "The weapons you used. The suffering you caused. The way your soldiers laughed while killing." She paused. "The way I found myself cheering when the Sunbreakers fired." Vance nodded slowly. She moved to stand beside the Archon, her eyes on the same distant stars. "War changes people," she said. "Even people who don't fight. You've seen things no one should see, done things no one should do, approved things that would have horrified your ancestors. Does that make me evil? No." Vance took a long drink. "It makes you a survivor. And survival isn't pretty. It never has been." They stood in silence for a moment. Below them, through the transparent floor of the observation deck, the station's gardens spread out in careful rows. Children played there. Concord children with silver skin and color-changing eyes. Human children with messy hair and loud voices. They chased each other between the flower beds, shrieking with laughter, utterly unaware of the darkness that had nearly consumed them. "We lost 11 million soldiers," Vance said quietly. 11 million human beings who volunteered to cross the galaxy and die for people they had never met. HFY felt something twist in her chest. "I know. I have read the reports. Do you know what the recruitment rate was? When we announced we were going to answer your call." She shook her head. 400% of our target. We had to turn people away. Young people, old people, people with families, people with everything to lose. Vance's voice was thick with something that might have been pride or might have been sorrow. "They saw your message. They saw what the Harrow were doing. And they decided, all on their own, that they would rather die fighting for strangers than live safe knowing they had done nothing." "Why?" HFY asked. She had wondered about this for 7 years. Why would they do that? Your species had never met us. You owed us nothing. Why would millions of your people choose to die for us? Vance was quiet for a long time. "Because we know what it's like to be helpless," she finally said. We know what it's like to watch something terrible happen and be unable to stop it. Every human alive carries memories of the times our species failed to protect the innocent. Wars, genocides, disasters. We could have prevented, but didn't. She turned to face Thessaly directly. Your message reached us at exactly the right moment. We were tired of killing each other. Tired of building weapons that would only be used against our own children. And then we heard your voice asking for help, and something changed. What changed? We realized we could be something else. Vance's eyes were bright with unshed tears. Not the monsters we feared we were. Not the angels you hoped we were. Something in between. Something that knew darkness intimately, but chose to walk toward light anyway. Thessaly thought about this for a long moment. She looked down at the children playing in the gardens. A human girl was teaching a Concord boy to play some kind of game with a ball. They were both laughing. We prayed for angels, she said slowly. We believed in cosmic justice, in enlightened beings who would save us through wisdom and compassion. And instead you got. Yes, Vance's voice was tired, old. She had aged more than 7 years and 7 years. Yes. Thessaly placed one of her 7-fingered hands on the human's scarred arm. We were naive. Angels could not have saved us. Angels do not know how to fight. They do not understand violence. They would have tried to reason with the harrow, and they would have been consumed like everyone else. So, you're glad you got monsters instead? No. Thessaly shook her head. I am not glad, but I am grateful, and I am beginning to understand something I did not understand before. Vance waited. You are not monsters, Thessaly said, and you are not angels. You are something stranger than both. Something more sacred. Sacred? Vance laughed bitterly. Lady, you saw what we did out there. You saw the Sunbreakers. You saw the poison and the psychological warfare and the genocide. There is nothing sacred about any of that. Perhaps not. Thessaly turned back to the window. But consider this. Your species evolved in violence. You have killed more of your own kind than the harrow killed of mine. You carry the capacity for terrible cruelty in your very genes. That's not exactly a ringing endorsement. I am not finished. Thessaly eyes changed color, shifting to a warm gold that Vance had never seen before. You carry all of that darkness inside you. Every human alive knows what their species is capable of. And yet, when you heard our prayer, you chose to help. You chose to cross the stars and die for strangers. You chose to turn your terrible gifts toward protection instead of destruction. She faced Vance again. Do you understand what that means? An angel who has never known temptation, who has never felt rage or hatred, who saves others simply because that is their nature. There is nothing remarkable about that. They are only doing what they were made to do. But us? But you? Thessaly smiled, and it was the first genuine smile she had managed in 7 years. You knew exactly what you were capable of. You knew the darkness in your own hearts. And you chose, freely and consciously, to be better. To sacrifice yourselves for beings you had never met. To use your monstrous gifts in service of something good. She squeezed Vance's arm gently. That is more sacred than any angel could ever be. That is the most beautiful thing I have ever seen. Vance was silent for a long time. When she finally spoke, her voice was rough. We're not good people, she said. Don't make us into something we're not. No, Thessaly agreed. You are not good. But you are here. You came when no one else could. You stayed when everyone else would have run. You fought and bled and died for people who could not fight for themselves. She looked down at the children in the gardens. The human girl had fallen down, and the Concord boy was helping her up. They were both still laughing. "Perhaps goodness is not the absence of darkness," she said quietly. "Perhaps it is the choice to carry that darkness and still walk toward the light." Vance watched the children too. Something in her cold eyes finally softened. Some wound that had been open for years finally began to close. "Yeah," she said. "Maybe it is." They stood together as the stars turned around them. Two species, one ancient and one young, united by tragedy and saved by sacrifice. The future stretched out before them, uncertain and vast and full of possibilities. Somewhere in the gardens below, a human child and a Concord child invented a new game together. They made up rules that combined the best of both their cultures. They laughed at their failures and celebrated their successes. They had no memory of the war that had almost ended everything. They knew only that the universe was big and strange and wonderful, and that they were not alone in it. That was enough. That was more than enough, and far away. In the cold darkness between galaxies, the void was silent. The harrow were gone. The nightmare was over. Humanity had answered the call, and the stars themselves seemed to breathe a sigh of relief.